So Roman, thanks for your amazing speech. Like a few questions, and like my first question, what do you think like is your role in blockchain now, and what kind of career path like to bring you here to work with the blockchain?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's really great to be here. Awesome conference. I really didn't expect it to be such a wild success, so thanks for that. In terms of what we're trying to do, like I said in my presentation, we're basically trying to build the final missing link to enable cyber-physical systems. And if you think about it, currently the blockchain is all virtual, right? We're all sort of in the matrix, like there's no real connections to the physical world. So to give you just one use case that a previous speaker was talking about, if you want to have your driving record to be available on a blockchain, a big problem is actually securing it. But even bigger problem is how do you prove that it is indeed coming from your vehicle, that you haven't, hacked the device that's actually recording your speed and acceleration and whatever else. And that device is now giving bogus numbers. How do you prove that the numbers that are actually streaming into the blockchain are true numbers that can be trusted? So a piece of technology that could enable that is called hardware trusted oracle. That is basically a piece of technology that we're trying to build.
Okay, thanks. And now you see like a lot of hype around blockchain. What do you think the real like customers' problems and business problems that you can solve with your product and blockchain?
I think I'm coming to the blockchain from the enterprise perspective. So my view is much closer to that of IBM, Hyperledger Foundation. I think if you look at the enterprises, what they're all trying to do, they're basically trying to figure out how they can optimize their business processes. Because a lot of them are now involved in transactions that are essentially transactions between multiple parties, right? So a perfect example of that would be supply chain management, right? If you're basically trying to build something, you have to manage a lot of things, a lot of parts that are getting into that, and trying to sort of do it through a centralized system becomes really difficult because then you have to pick somebody in that supply chain who would actually be running that system. So all of the companies are trying to figure out how they can involve multiple parties, that actually have to be there for the transaction to happen in such a way that they can, on one hand, not really trust each other because that's not going to happen, but on the other hand, trust the important parts, that guarantee that a transaction is going to complete. So to me, that's probably the biggest use case that I see in the enterprise. And I don't really have much insight into, more of the cryptocurrency or some of the other applications of the blockchain.
Okay, thanks. And what is the main technical challenge, or maybe another kind of challenge that you face it in like process of working with blockchain?
I think the biggest challenge is basically a lack of talent at this point. There's an amazing group of people here, but if you collect all of the experts in the blockchain space, I think they can actually fit not just into this building, but basically into this room, right? It will be pretty packed, but they would still fit. That's nowhere near enough for the world that we're living in. So I think, we really need to invest in evangelizing and basically trying to bring blockchain to as many developers as we possibly can. Maybe this is, some of it is through open source, some of it through education, some of it maybe, universities finally waking up and actually starting, blockchain sort of courses, within their curriculum. But I think we really have to solve the issue of not enough people being able to really meaningfully contribute to this technology.
Okay, and also my question, next question is connected with the talents. So what do you think the main skill set that is needed for the blockchain specialists?
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting question because it's a very interdisciplinary, set of skills, right? Because on one hand, you have to be a reasonable software engineer, right? You have to be able to write code and, just feel comfortable with that. But on the other hand, you have to be a reasonable cryptographer, and again, I'm not saying, designing your own cryptographic algorithms. I mean, that's definitely not required, but at least understanding the implications of existing crypto. But interestingly enough, you also have to be a little bit of an anthropologist. Because a lot of mechanics that are essentially being built into the blockchain, they're in there to manage and mitigate, trust issues. And you actually have to understand, human nature and human history enough to not step into the mistakes that's been made multiple times before in trying to manage trust and mitigate trust issues. So you actually have to be a little bit of a, student of the history. And that's actually why I recommend this book, called Debt. the first 5,000 years. I think that's a required reading for anybody who is actually getting into the blockchain space.
Okay, cool. And as a community, like, what can we do? Like, do not start like a blockchain winter, like to support the blockchain in enterprise.
So I think we actually have to support existing efforts. Like Hyperledger Foundation is doing amazing work. So I really thank IBM for popularizing and bringing all these use cases to the front of the sort of enterprise understanding of what blockchain is capable of. There's a few other options in the open source space. I would like more blockchain projects to actually be governed in the same way that popular open source projects are governed. And today it's more based on sort of this completely decentralized model. We're actually seeing those governance issues, for example, with EOS, lately, where the technology itself is really nice, but the governance is, could be much improved. So I think blockchain communities, can actually learn a thing or two from the open source communities. We've been doing it in the open source, for a number of years now. And when we started, we also had no clue how to govern. But now we're actually getting there. We're making it, really reasonable to sustain projects as big as Linux kernel, right? So to me, those would be the things that I would recommend doing.
Okay, thanks. And last question: what do you think about Rethink conference so far?
I love it. Like I said, I love it. I want more of it. I will try to invite all of my friends to the next one, and please do it in the Bay Area.
Okay, thank you very much.